Etnikas, Etnikas. And so we went to Etnikas for the first time to experience this ayahuasca retreat. And within a very short period of time, I realized how serious this really was. We had to cleanse to prepare for it. We had 2 weeks of no chocolate, no coffee, no red meat, no pork, no sex, no masturbation, no excessive processed foods, and a really deep awareness and focus on what we were trying to get out of the experience. In the first ayahuasca ceremony, pretty much nothing happens. No visuals happen, nothing like DMT that I experienced, except the words, "nurture the roots," come to me. Nurture the roots. Didn't know what that meant though. The next day, we talked to the shaman and the little organizer that was there. His name was Angel. And they asked me, what was your experience like? I say, well, I'd experienced a lot of DMT ceremonies before, DMT experiences, and I really expected a lot more from this, and I didn't really get what I was looking for. I really came for something a lot bigger than that. The organizer just sort of nods, and he translates to the shaman, and the shaman kind of snickers, and he kind of snickers, and the shaman says something to him, and he talks back to me and translates and says, Mother Ayahuasca doesn't always give you what you want. She gives you what you need. The shaman says that as she was preparing you for tonight's ceremony, she was preparing your body to receive the medicine, and it's very important that you use respectful words when it comes to Mother Ayahuasca, because she sometimes will have us own up to those words, basically. Okay, whatever. So this is how I felt at the time. So I go to my room, I write a letter to Mother Ayahuasca, I go up into the mountains behind the retreat center, and I just pray and pray and pray and say, Mother Ayahuasca, I came here for something spectacular. I came here for a miraculous healing experience. Please give me what I need. And I buried the letter in the mountain. And so that night when the ceremony began, within probably 20 minutes, my consciousness was completely gone somewhere else. All of a sudden, there were all of these little beings around me, and they were saying, you better get on your hands and knees and surrender. You better just get out from where you're at right now. Get on your hands and knees and surrender, because we're not going anywhere until you do. I could feel this ominous figure behind these little gnome-like beings who were telling me to get on my hands and knees and surrender. So I got on my hands and knees, and I surrendered, and I was in child's pose and just saying, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender. Then all of a sudden, the trip begins, and there's this voice whispering in my ear that I knew to be Creator, Universe, God, whatever you like to call it. And it's saying, look at yourself, look at what you are, look at where you've come from. And I look at my body becomes all of the mineral kingdom, and then it continues to evolve until it becomes the plant kingdom, and my arms become vines, and my whole body becomes like a tree trunk. And then I continue to evolve, and I become an amphibian figure where my arms are like tentacles at some point, and then I become like a lizard, and then I continue to evolve until I become ape and primates, and then into humans, and then even beyond humans. And I continue evolving until finally there are all these beings around me, and they have their hands on my chest and my stomach, and they're saying to me, you have to learn to heal yourself before you can walk amongst the angels. You have to learn to heal yourself before you can walk amongst the angels. This whole time I'm throwing up endlessly, at least 30 or 40 times in this 6-hour ceremony. For the last 2 hours, I spent them in the bathroom with diarrhea, throwing up in a bucket at the same time. It was a vicious experience. The organizers there rubbing my back, saying, open your heart, forgive yourself, let it go, let it go, let it go. And I'm just throwing up and throwing up and throwing up. And during the experience, I'm looking at these shamans while I'm high on ayahuasca. I'm looking at these shamans and I'm thinking, holy shit. They were out of focus for a sec. I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, these are ancient medicine people. I could see them not as their 60-year-old self or 50-year-old self, but as these ancient beings who have manifested time and time again to assist in the healing of the world. So needless to say, this experience was totally life-changing. I woke up the next day and said, I'll never do ayahuasca again. 5 months later, I came back to Peru again with a group of people, this time clients. I brought some clients with me. Now, in this first trip, I got to meet the owner of the retreat. His name is also Angel. It turns out the organizer of my first retreat, who's also named Angel, is his son. So they are both angels, the two of them. And remember, Mother Ayahuasca and all those beings said you have to learn to heal yourself before you can walk amongst the angels. I didn't know what that meant at the time. So we go back to Peru again in October of 2016. This is the trip that changed everything for me. I brought a group of clients there with me, and including my ex-fiance and one of my very close friends, and we all went to Peru together, and we had an entire trip planned for it. I just noticed that I do this sucking thing every once in a while, so I'm going to call myself out for it to see if maybe I stop doing it. So anyway, we get to Peru and we've got this whole trip planned, not just the ayahuasca retreats, but we also planned a tour with a man named Brian Forrester. If you haven't heard of Brian Forrester and you're interested in this type of stuff, this guy is an absolute expert on ancient human history. Not just ancient human history, but ancient human technology. He has been studying all of the ancient megalithic sites in the world for years. He's written 22 books on the subject. He's written books about the pyramids, about Machu Picchu, about Peru. He lives in Peru. He's written books about all of these ancient megalithic sites. And he's got some really incredible theories. So first we do a tour with him of Sacsayhuaman, which is this ancient Mayan temple, Inca temple that could be 10,000 years old, could be 12,000 years old, could be even longer than that. There's one rock at Sacsayhuaman that's 125 tons. They have no idea how the rock got there on the top of a mountain, considering in Peru there were no straight trees until the 1800s. All of their trees were jagged like this. They brought in trees from Australia. That's how they got the straight trees, apparently. This is what Brian told me. And so how did they get a 125-ton rock up a hill to put into this wall with hundreds, maybe thousands, I'm not sure how many, of other rocks almost the same size? And not just that, but they're cut so perfectly that they stack on top of each other like jigsaw puzzle pieces. You can't fit a piece of paper between them. There's no mortar. There's no glue holding them together. They just sit perfectly together because of how they're cut, how accurately they're cut. Now, we don't have tools or technology that can do that today. We don't have it. It's not possible. So how did they do it? We have no idea. So at this point, I'd been studying ancient human history for a bit, and I had some theories that I wanted to run by Brian because I've been following this guy on YouTube for years. I've been following his videos and learning his theories. And so the theory that I wanted to ask him is, I did that second thing again. What's the story of human history? Where did we come from? What are these sites? What are these places in the world? And this isn't quite maybe to the detail Brian's theory, but this is my theory. And Brian's books support this theory. So the theory is this. In Brian's book, Aftershock, he writes about an ancient flood that happened around 11,500 years ago, give or take. In the Bible, they call it Noah's flood. There's other stories and indigenous stories. They have lots of different names for it. The idea is that this flood may have been only 3 months long. And basically what happened is the whole world flooded except for the tops of the mountains and the really high peaks of the world, of the planet. It was completely flooded for maybe 3 months, or maybe longer, and then the flood kind of subsided. And during that time, the wisdom keepers of the world are believed to have hidden either in tops of mountains, like in Machu Picchu in Peru. It's basically, Machu Picchu is so fascinating. Imagine a mountain like this. The ancient people cut the top of it off somehow, and then used the rocks that they cut that are left over from cutting the top to build the retreat center, right? They used the rocks at the top of the mountain. They cut them down somehow. We have no idea how, and built this entire retreat center on the top of a mountain that used to take 5 days of walking to get there. No roads or anything, right? This is ancient times. And there's a good chance that Machu Picchu was built on top of a much older retreat center or temple far beyond that. And if you go to Machu Picchu, you'll see that some of the block work is Inca work, but some of it's pre-Inca. It's even older. It's using technology that we can't explain. So the theory is that there was this ancient flood, this cataclysmic flood around 11,500 years ago that flooded the entire planet except for the tops of the mountains, and the wisdom keepers hid there and maybe in underground cities. We've discovered underground cities in Turkey, 8 stories deep. We've discovered that the pyramids of Giza, although there's a lot on top of the ground in the pyramids of Giza, there's far more beneath the surface. There's an entire underground city that we haven't even discovered yet underneath the pyramids of Giza. And this stuff is all, you can go look this stuff up on your own. Again, Brian's got many books on this. You should check him out if you can. So he's touring us around Sacsayhuaman, and I'm asking him these theories, and he says, yeah, there's definitely an ancient civilization. We were definitely more advanced in the past, and practices like shamanism, temple magic or high magic, and many other forms like Kabbalah and alchemy and even Hinduism are ancient forms of self-healing, of self-actualization, ancient forms of self-realization that have survived this flood and have been passed on orally because there were no written words. Most of the stuff in the world has been flooded and destroyed except for the megalithic structures that survived. So we didn't have a lot of written word except for what was written in the cuneiform tablets and the Sumerian tablets and inside the pyramids, the pyramid texts and lots of different ancient records like that. But not really like we have nowadays with books and so on, detailed records. We didn't have that kind of stuff. So it had to be passed on through oral tradition. So I'm experiencing all this and it's confirming all of my theories. I'm thinking, wow, this is fucking incredible, right? This is amazing. And so after the tour, we go and meet with the owner again of Etnikas. Again, this is my second time in Peru, October of 2016. We meet with the owner of Etnikas and he comes over to our Airbnb and he's talking to us. And he says that he identifies as a Buddhist Christian Inca. And I think Buddhist Christian Inca, that doesn't make any sense to me. How could a shaman be a Christian? At this point in my life, I had a real beef against Christianity for all of the stuff that's happened in the world, all of the forceful religion that's happened in the world, all of that kind of stuff. I didn't get it. So he says, why don't you guys and girls go down and see this medicine expo that's happening at the Cusco Square tomorrow. Go check it out. And so we did. So we went and checked out this medicine expo. Turns out it's totally in Spanish. None of us spoke fluent Spanish. And the girls we were with wanted to go to the main cathedral in the Cusco Square. It's this massive cathedral that they built on top of an Inca temple. So basically the Spanish invaded Peru, Cusco, killed most of the natives, and then destroyed their temples and built cathedrals on top of them. So I didn't want to go to the cathedral, but the girls really wanted to go. So we decided to go. And when we get there, there's this big statue of Jesus on the cross hanging at the very front of the cathedral as soon as you walk in. And I'm just thinking to myself, I don't get it. I don't get it. I can't resonate with that image. I don't understand. How is that supposed to be an image of love and happiness and fulfillment and freedom? I don't get it. So I decided to pray. And I said, I'm praying to this Jesus character is a character in my reality, and I believe that I've created my reality for myself. So how am I supposed to resonate with this? How am I supposed to understand this symbol? And as if somebody was speaking into my ear, I swear to you, as if somebody was speaking to my ear, a voice says, why don't you let that crucifixion be a reminder of your own crucifixion? Why don't you let that symbol remind you of the pain and the suffering you've gone through and continue to go through as you wake up to the truth of what you are? Why don't you let that crucifixion be a reminder of your process from ignorance to remembering? And I start crying in this church, and the person I'm with, the girl I'm with is, what's wrong? And I don't know, I'll talk about it later. So we leave the cathedral and we go see my friend Marco, who's a little tour guide in Peru. He does these walking tours. They're amazing tours. If you're ever in Cusco, downtown Cusco, look for the free walking tour t-shirts. These guys are great. But he says, wow, I've had all these people with me. I had 4 or 5 people with me. He says, wow, I'm going to give you a really special tour today. I'm going to give you a special one I don't usually give people. And this is a walking tour usually, but he gets a tour bus and he drives us around. We go to all these places. We go up to the top of the mountain, top of this mountain down by Cusco Square, and we get out of the tour bus, and as soon as we get out, there's the statue of Jesus standing up there like this on the top of the mountain, a sexy woman, bisexual woman in Cusco. And I'm thinking, what the fuck is going on here? Now there's a Jesus statue. We just left the cathedral. Like, what are the chances of that? And I didn't know what was going on. And so we finally go to Etnikas now, and we're going there for our retreat. And we've got 3 ayahuasca ceremonies planned. Again, this is my second time going. I know there's a lot of information in this video, but it's going to make sense to you very soon. So we do the first ceremony. Not much happens again for me. I don't have a lot of effects. And the next morning, we go and meet the shaman and the organizer again. And this time the organizer is Angel Sr.'s other son. So Angel Jr.'s brother, Teddy. And so Teddy's now the organizer for this particular retreat. I go up to Teddy before or during the reflection the next day, and I say, listen, Teddy, you know I've been here before. You know my history, mixed martial arts fighting, and you know that I've done a lot of different psychedelic drugs. And I'd really like to have enough ayahuasca this time so that I never have to do it again. And he says, okay, sure. And so that evening, They pass out everyone's ayahuasca. Everyone gets about this much, and I got about this much. They filled my cup right to the rim. And as it's going around, everyone's like, whoa, uh-oh. And I look at it and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is this? And I drank it, and it was just, I have shivers thinking about it. It was the most challenging thing to drink all of that and then to hold it down for as long as I can. And almost immediately I'm feeling the effects, and my consciousness is gone, just skyrocketing away. I'm throwing up for what feels like hours, and the shaman comes over and, are you okay? Are you okay? He doesn't speak a lot of English, and I say, well, we're almost done, right? We're almost done? He said, what? I said, we're almost done? No. And I hear everyone in the room start snickering and laughing. Most of them didn't even feel the experiences yet. They weren't even having visions, and I'm waiting for it to be over. So I don't know at what point what I'm about to tell you next happened in the ceremony, but this is what happened. The first thing I really remember is my consciousness started dissolving away, and Ricky Goodall started dissolving away. The room started dissolving away, and then I just became awareness inside of an infinite blackness. Infinite suffering, infinite nothingness, infinite ignorance, infinite nothing is the only thing I can say to explain it. And every time I even had a thought, it would disappear. I didn't know I was Ricky Goodall anymore. I didn't know I had a body. I wasn't aware of the room that I was in. I was completely disconnected from myself and existing in this infinite state of blackness. And I was terrified. I was so scared. And I didn't know why I was scared, but I was so scared. And I was saying, where am I? What is this? I want to go home. I want to go home. No response. Where am I? Where am I? I want to go home. What is this? Still no response. Finally, a voice says, what's wrong? What's wrong? And it's a feminine voice. And suddenly I knew it to be Mother Ayahuasca. She says, what's wrong? And I said, I don't want to be here. I want to go home. I'm scared. What is this? I want to go home. And she's kind of has this playful tone to her voice. And she says, what's wrong? What's wrong? I thought you wanted to know what it feels like to be God. I thought you wanted to know what it feels like to be the creator. She says, don't you recognize at this level of your consciousness, you're all that is. You're the only thing at this level of your awareness. There's nothing for you to relate to. There's nothing for you to connect to. There's no one to be in relationship with here. At this level of your consciousness, you're all that is, all that ever was, and all that ever will be for infinity. She says, don't you recognize this life you've created as Ricky Goodall is the vacation you've given yourself to get away from being all that is? She said, don't you realize this human life is your way of taking a break from being the creator of everything? She says, don't you recognize the ancient people never bowed down out of fear of their creator. They bowed down out of compassion. Thank you, thank you, thank you for this miracle of life. Thank you, thank you, thank you for this miracle of suffering so that we could experience anything, because anything is better than nothing for infinity. And obviously my mind is completely blown during this experience, and I don't know what to think, and I start to kind of come back to my body and start to come back to the room. But then another crazy thing happens. I start seeing the six-sided star, and for those of you who might not be familiar with what the six-sided star looks like, it's basically an upward pointing triangle and a downward pointing triangle overlapping one another like that. That symbol starts coming to me, and it's burning in my consciousness. It's just like I can't get it out of my mind. It's just right there. And Mother Ayahuasca says, you're going to study this symbol. You're going to learn what it means. You're going to study Hebrew. You're going to study Egyptian. You're going to study the ancient prophecies and the ancient ways. And you're going to interpret this symbol, and you're going to share it with other people and help them find the light and help them find healing. This is so intense. She said, remember, study Hebrew. And she takes me to this place, which felt like an ancient land, maybe Jerusalem, maybe somewhere like that. She takes me to this place, and I can feel that I'm in this ancient land, maybe Israel, I'm not sure. This ancient place where Hebrew is the fundamental language, and these are the times. I start feeling how ancient this practice of shamanism really is. I start feeling how ancient our world really is, how ancient human beings really are, how we're so much older than we realize, and how reality is so much older. It's infinite. It's no beginning, no end. And I'm feeling all of this. And she says, you're going to study this symbol, and you're going to learn it, and you're going to share it with others. Then she says, this part's the really bizarre part, you're going to start a religion, and you're going to bring ayahuasca to Canada, and you're going to help make this known all over the world. Again, at this point, it's 2016. A couple years before that, I was an MMA fighter, doing coke, fighting in bars, drinking and driving, and so many other things that I shouldn't have been doing. Cheating on girlfriends, having affairs with married women, and just everything. I sinned in almost every way you can, except for killing anyone, raping anyone, or doing anything really, 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 really terrible. But I'd done almost everything else. And so to hear something like this was just like, what? How? Why me? How me? I don't get it. And so she said, start studying Hebrew, start studying Egyptian, start studying the six-sided star. This is going to be your purpose. And again, at this, I'm still throwing up so much during this time, like viciously throwing up. There were points where I was drawing symbols on my forehead, and I don't remember why I was drawing them on my forehead, but I was drawing these symbols and praying at the same time in a language I didn't understand, and pressing all these buttons. And the shaman would come over and he'd suck things out of my head, and he'd suck things out of my chest, and he'd draw symbols on my forehead too. And again, I'm throwing up. And then at some point I had diarrhea and throwing up and diarrhea at the same time. It got so bad that they came into me in the bathroom after about 6 hours of this retreat or this ceremony, and they said, we have to give you a needle to stop you from throwing up because you could damage your vocal cords if you keep going. So they had to give me a needle to take me out of the ayahuasca trip. Again, at this point, it's been 6 hours, so I'm totally fine with that. And I start freezing after they give me this needle. I think it was Gravol. They wrap me in all these blankets and trying to rub me to warm me up. The shaman comes over and he's sucking more stuff out of my head. And so we leave the ceremony, we leave the retreat, and I just don't even know what to say. I don't want to tell any of this stuff to anyone because it sounds to me at the time fucking nuts, right? It sounded crazy. I didn't really want to share it with anyone, but I didn't know what else to do. While we're still in Peru, I decided I got to move out of the city. I was living in the downtown core of the city. That's it. I got to move away from the city. I got to get out into nature. I got to get, outside of the hustle bustle of the world. I found a place to live while I was in Peru. Found a place 20 minutes outside of the city, exactly what I imagined I would find. I found it on a website while I was still in Peru, emailed the person, asked to go look at the place as soon as I got home. As soon as I got home, I go and look at the place. I move there immediately. This place is 20 minutes outside of the city, surrounded by nature, with a basketball court and a pool and all of these other things on the property. Now, what I didn't know at the time until later on is I was moving to a retreat center for myself. I was moving to a healing center. And so I moved to Timberley, I moved to this area, and I start studying so deeply. I start studying Hermetics. I start studying the Hermetica. I start studying the Kybalion. I start studying Hermetic Kabbalah. I start studying Egyptian alchemy. I study Gnosticism. I study books like the Sefer Yetzirah, some of the Torah. I study Christian mysticism. I study Taoism, Hinduism, Inca shamanism. I perform hundreds of ceremonies in these 2.5 years that I spent in this place in Timberley. I perform so many ceremonies on myself that I start finding and discovering traumas I never even knew existed in my past. I start remembering terrible traumas I'd gone through as a child. I watched my father almost kill my mother one night high on cocaine, slam her up against a fence, choking her with a shovel, literally choking her against the house, and she's looking at me at 6 years old and saying, please help, please help, please help. I have to run to the neighbors. They won't answer the door because they hear all the fighting happening. I run down to the payphone. I call 911 and the police came. Now I'm only 6 years old. A few months before that, my father and my mother were arguing up on a balcony, and my dad was down in the yard with my brother and I, and my mom was up on the balcony. She threw a bicycle at my father, and it landed on my brother's head and almost killed him. We had to rush him to the hospital. I start finding these traumas as well as when my parents split up. I told you earlier, my parents split up when I was 9 years old. And the reason they split up is because when we moved to Pictou County away from Dartmouth, we were supposed to get away from drugs and alcohol. And one day my mom and my brother and I came home. My dad was drinking. I looked at my mom at just 9 years old, remembering how abusive things used to be. And I said, we have to leave. And we left. We went to a home for battered women and stayed there. My dad wasn't allowed to know where we were. He wasn't allowed to contact us in any way at all. He was forced to move out of our house, and then we went back there. And I felt so guilty as a child for breaking my parents up that I started acting out, started getting angry, started getting frustrated, started picking on my brother, started arguing with my mother, and 6 months later was taken to foster care. So in my mind, not only did I split my parents up, but I also caused myself to go to foster care. all of these traumas start coming to the surface as I'm doing this deep healing work in Timberley, doing all of these ceremonies. I had a special room just for doing ceremony work, just for performing this temple magic. And I'll tell you more about this temple magic as we go. In August of 2018, as I'm still going through this healing work and now engaged to this this woman, sorry, before I get there, let me go back a little bit. In January of 2016, I finally registered that religion, or 2018, I finally registered that religion, and I brought ayahuasca to Canada. I brought a shaman from Peru to Canada. 2 weeks after that, October 2016, the second time I went to Peru, 2 weeks later, I go to see my lawyer, and he says, hey, did you know that you can register a religion to bring ayahuasca to Canada? Now remember, Mother Ayahuasca said that to me in my ayahuasca ceremony, and now he's saying it to me 2 weeks later. So I did that. I organized the religion, organized a religious corporation, started developing a religious idea in my mind, which is what you're learning about today, and started developing this kind of concept about what my beliefs were so that I could register this religion. And so we registered the religion. In January of 2018, we hosted our first ayahuasca retreat. We brought a shaman from Peru, the same shaman that the young guy named Angel, the owner's son, he's also a shaman. I brought him here from Peru to perform an ayahuasca retreat for us. So then fast forward a few months later, I'm going through all of this deep healing. Oh, I forgot a very important part of this story. When I emailed that coach, Rich Litvin, and begged him to coach me before I went to Peru in May of 2016, he didn't respond to me, but his administrator eventually did respond to me. She connected me to one of his coaches, and his coach coached me for 3 months for free, taught me how to do all of this deep healing work, this subconscious reprogramming work. Then I took a program with her. Then I apprenticed under her for a whole year, and then I eventually went and trained with them in California. So between the shamanism, which is all about forgiveness and cleansing the body, cleansing the mind, cleansing the spirit, and this deep coaching, which is all about reprogramming the subconscious mind, I started learning how to do this incredibly deep healing on myself, combining these things. And then with all of the other stuff I was studying, the Kabbalah, the alchemy, the Gnosticism, the Christianity, the Taoism, the Hinduism, the shamanism, and all of this other stuff I start diving into, I start learning how trauma and how pain creates struggle and suffering in our reality. I start recognizing, I discover this fundamental important idea is that all of our past pain affects our present moment. All of it does. If it's not healed, it affects our behavior, it affects how we see the world, and it affects how we behave, and therefore what we create in the world. As you'll learn soon, we don't live in a physical reality, we live in an energetic reality, a holographic reality almost. It's not what you think it is, it's not what we think it is, it's not how we can perceive it. In August of 2018, I performed a ceremony after a really stressful situation happened in my life, and I had a memory come to me, and the full memory came out in October of 2018, but it started in August of 2018, and that memory was a sexual assault. I was sexually abused at 3-4 years old, and I had no idea. I couldn't remember it. It was my grandmother's boyfriend. My parents didn't know. Nobody knew except for me, and since I was so young, I just buried it. They told me it never happened. My grandmother and her boyfriend told me it never happened. It was just a dream, and I completely forgot about it. And this came up not in an ayahuasca ceremony, not in a dimethyltryptamine ceremony or a psilocybin ceremony, but a cannabis ceremony. I started adding cannabis to this temple magic practice, this high magic practice, which is incredibly powerful by itself. You don't need any plant medicines with high magic or with temple magic. It's not like shamanism where the primary kind of magic happens with plant medicines, and a lot of times, not always. There are lots of shamans that do work without plant medicines. But when you add plant medicines to this temple magic, to this high magic, this ancient Egyptian Hebrew kind of magic practice, it becomes incredibly powerful. And something like even just cannabis can change our lives. So up to this point of October 2018, I had experienced a lot of different stress and depression and anxiety in my life. I told you a lot about the stuff I experienced before. The overwhelming, obsessive feelings to my exes when they would break up with me. I wouldn't be able to let them go. I couldn't figure out why. And the reason I couldn't let my relationships go is because when I was taken to foster care, I was taken out of my mother's custody, and my brother was allowed to stay home. So in my mind, the first woman who ever loved me gave me up for another man. And I was always afraid that women were going to do that to me in the future. So I would cheat on them, I would lie to them, I would do everything I could to subconsciously sabotage the relationship. Then when they'd finally break up with me, the guilt would be so overwhelming that I would try so hard to get them back just to redeem myself because of all the guilty shit that I'd done in the past. And it was this twisted cycle that I had myself in that I didn't know. So in August of 2018, I started experiencing these really intense symptoms of depression, anxiety, social isolation, hypervigilance. I'm paranoid. I'm scared all the time. I'm very judgmental. I went to Peru in October of 2018, terrified, totally terrified by myself for my third time. Just before I went to Peru, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. I talked to a psychologist, told her about all the experiences I had my whole life, all of the pain I'd experienced, and she said, this looks exactly like complex PTSD. So I thought, okay, that's it. I got to do what I got to do to heal this. I know that it can be done. I believe in it. I have faith in it. I have to heal this. So I went back to Peru with that intention, but in this entirely triggered PTSD-like state, totally triggered, terrified. Everything that could go wrong went wrong on that trip. And I go to the Etnikas again, and in the first ceremony, the six-sided star shows up again. The same symbol starts showing up to me again. Mother Ayahuasca says, you're going to have to accept this purpose of yours. You're going to have to just accept it at some point. You're going to have to surrender into what you are. No more hiding. No more holding back. You've been given a gift. You have to share this gift with the world. You can't keep it. It's not yours to keep. This was given to you to give to other people, and you're going to have to do it, or it's just going to cause you suffering and pain in your life. And at the same time, the shaman comes over and starts singing to me, and his higher self is saying the same thing to me. You have to accept what you are. You have to surrender into what you are. You can't hide anymore. And so the next day we wake up, I tell the shaman the experience, and he says, yes, Mother Ayahuasca told me that you are a shaman, you are a doctor, you are a master, you are meant to do this work. You can bring Mother Ayahuasca with you everywhere you go. Even if you're not using ayahuasca, you can still pray to her and call upon her and bring her in ceremony. He said, tonight I'm going to sing a special song, an Icaro they call it, or an arcana. I'm going to sing a special arcana to put Mother Ayahuasca inside of you so that you can call upon her everywhere you go, anytime you need her. And then he eventually gave me this necklace, which is ayahuasca vine, and I believe these are chacruna seeds, which is the two plants used to make ayahuasca. He starts singing this chant to me in this song, in this ceremony, and again, the six-sided star shows up. I start seeing all of these visions of my life, all of these visions of my experience of reality, what I believe reality is. I believe reality is like sort of like a video game simulation that we're all playing, and I'll tell you more about that later. And as I'm having this realization, oh my God, life's just a video game, life's just a simulation, the organizer, her name was Fernanda, she comes over and she says, Ricky, you are the driver of this adventure. You are the driver of this adventure. In other words, you're the pilot of the video game, right at the exact same moment. It's amazing how these things happen. So I get initiated as a shaman because of all my efforts, because of my experiences, because of the visions that I have. The shaman interpreted them as me being initiated. Mother Ayahuasca shows people these things when she wants them to do this healing work with other people. And so shortly after that, a couple months later, I traveled to California in October of 2018 to work with Rich Litvin's team there in their intensive and have an incredible experience there. I got to stand up in front of the whole crowd and tell them all how I feel, 150 people, some of them millionaires and even higher income. I connect with this incredible coach named Jackie Netchell. A couple months later, my engagement ends. And in January of this year, 2019, and that's when the final level of the healing started to come out. When we finally separated, I was faced once again with those same abandonment patterns, now not nearly as intense as they used to be, but faced with them again. Given everything I knew and everything I learned and everything I studied, I knew how to get through this. So I started healing myself. I started performing more ceremonies. I went to Mexico in March of this past year, 2019, to study Mayan shamanism and to go to the different pyramids there, Chichen Itza and El Castillo and Templo de Ixchel, which is this little temple on the Mayan island Isla Mujeres, which I spent a week there. And so finally I come home and I'm still living in this place in Timberlea until May 1st. I'm still living out there in this retreat center for myself, now alone without my fiance, my ex-fiance, feeling a lot of pain, feeling a lot of loneliness. And so on Easter weekend, which was the weekend before I was meant to move out of this place, I decided to perform some ceremonies. I decided to do a ceremony on Good Friday to mimic the crucifixion or the death of Jesus. And I started at 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. was my intention, but I took 5 grams of psilocybin mushrooms and I ended up staying in there for 9.5 hours. During that ceremony, I laid on the floor while higher self, God, creator, whatever you want to call it, was talking through me and giving me directions, saying, just relax your body. I'm going to reprogram your nervous system now so that I can remove some of the trauma triggers that you have so that you're not getting triggered all the time in your relationships. But your job is to really relax as much as you can so the medicine can work through you and I can start to reprogram your body. This is coming through my mouth during this experience. These words are coming through my mouth. God, creator, higher self is talking to me the whole time, telling me what to do. And I'm doing all these different stretches, all these different ways of moving my body. Then I start singing and I start chanting. And as I'm singing, I feel my whole body lighting up. My hair's standing on end. I've got chills through my whole body. It's euphoric. I'm just singing. And again, I'm in there for 9.5 to 10 hours. The next day, I do a little ceremony for 420. It was a cannabis day in here in Canada. And then on Sunday, I do a ceremony with my parents and my younger brother, a DMT healing ceremony. My parents used cannabis. My brother used DMT. This is a first for me. I never imagined my parents. First of all, I told you what kind of relationship they used to have. That's just the beginning of it. It was crazy. It was an insane relationship. And here they are doing a ceremony on Easter with my brother and I in the room together. They're best friends now, very close. Finally, the next day, Monday, Easter Monday, I'm driving home from the flotation center here in Halifax. I go floating there all the time. If you've never tried floating and you're in Halifax, you have to check out the flotation center. It's incredible. And it's 9:30 at night. My intuition says, you have to do another DMT ceremony. And I say, oh, I don't want to do a DMT ceremony. It's 9:30 at night. My intuition says, no, you have to. You got to do it. You got to do it. Okay, and the word trust kept coming to me. Trust. So I go into my temple room, my room that's set up like this. I perform the rituals to open the sacred space and to get the space ready. And then I perform the medicine ritual and I start using the DMT. In that experience, this being shows up to me and he says, look at what we are. And his hair was the whole universe. It was just the whole ever-expanding universe. And he's like, look at this. Look at what we are. Look at what you are a part of. Look at what you are the focal point for. Look at what you come from. And I'm looking at just the magnificence, the miraculous existence of creation. And I'm just saying, wow. And in that moment, I knew everything there was to know. I knew everything there was to experience. I understood everything, the spiritual truth. I understood all of it. All of a sudden, my sacral chakra started shaking, almost quivering. And this energy starts moving through my body. It was this reddish, whitish energy moving through my body. And it comes up and it just starts pouring like a fountain all over my whole body. My legs are crossed. I'm up on the ground, laying on my back, just saying, wow, oh my God, wow. It was the most blissful experience I'd ever had in my whole life. It was a full Kundalini awakening. And in that ceremony, higher self, God, creator, whatever you like to say, says, now it's time to stop hiding. Now it's time to get this back out into the world. It's time to get the truth out there. And so what I'm about to share with you now, after I've told you the backstory, is the truth that I've discovered and the truth that has become my truth and that I'm very confident could change the world. And to be totally blunt and transparent, through I don't know how many ceremonies now, dozens of ceremonies, God, higher self, creator, whatever you want to call it, has spoken directly to me, has pointed me to the right books, the right teachers, the right healers to develop what I'm about to share with you, and has completely guided me every step of the way to help me take these really complex spiritual concepts like Kabbalah, like alchemy, like Christian mysticism, like Gnosticism, and be able to deliver it and package it in a way that anyone can understand. And that's what this program is really about. This is my way of listening to what my higher self or what God has told me to do, and I'm putting that out in the world. And believe me, it's very vulnerable for me to say this. I've been afraid of ridicule subconsciously and all these other things. But I'm not afraid because I know that this is just part of my mission. It's part of my purpose. So here's what I learned. So first of all, I'm sure you've heard of Elon Musk. And if you haven't, Elon Musk is the CEO of Tesla, and he was the founder